if the U.S. dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency, what's next? Like we're seeing what happened with BRIC or BRICS to preclude South Africa from that. What would happen with that?
Don't open that can of worms, because we've been talking about this de-dollarization theory on our channel for months now. And it is true that the world is becoming de-dollarized. Yes, kind of. There's more trade happening in non-dollar denominated currencies. So you're getting oil deals done in renminbi or Chinese renminbi or stuff like that.
Chinese yuan.
Or whatever, or Russian ruble or whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, that Chinese yuan is still pegged to the US dollar. Now, is de-dollarization happening? It's a process that will take many years.
Yeah.
But what is the alternative? So, okay, cool. We all decided we don't want to be part of the US dollar. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to China? You think China's a better option than the United States? Look, maybe the US isn't perfect, but let me tell you, China's not much of a better option. I don't think you want to be in the South African currency. It hasn't got a great track record. You certainly don't want to be in the Turkish lira. So where you want to be in the Russian currency? So the problem is that the dollar right now is the best of a bad bunch. And in order for de-dollarization to happen, what you need for there to be a better option. Because otherwise, as capitalists, people will hold on to their money and say, even though this is bad, that option over there is a little bit worse.
It's still government counterparty risk.
Yeah. Now, look, we've taken the orange pill. So for us, we see Bitcoin and we look at Bitcoin and say, look, you need to have a certain percentage of a portfolio in a neutral money that's not linked to any country, that's linked to an algorithm and a mathematical formula. But other than that, and again, I put the question to you guys and say, if there is de-dollarization and you guys are forced to de-dollarize, where are you going to put your money?
Yeah. But the
answer is you're going to rather be in US dollars.
Yeah, when you go back, and I agree, by the way, and I think that we are definitely in the process of de-dollarization. That's without question. And the dollar is absolutely losing its reserve currency status. But that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over years. That happens over decades. And if you go back to the last world reserve currency, the British pound, that started losing its dominance in the 1920s. When they came in 1944 in Bretton Woods, that was just kind of the icing on the cake, right? And so what you see is you never have a global reserve currency that is implemented by decree, that you have a king or a Putin or whatever come in and say, from now on, we are using this BRICS new currency. What happens, it's always bottoms up. So those entities within that economic system say, hey, we want to do more business with the United States, going back to the 1920s, right? Because the U.S. is growing and growing and growing. We have more business. We have more customers there. So we want to hold more dollars on our balance sheet. And as the U.S. economy grows as a percentage of global GDP, so does the use of the dollar. And that's how it happens. So the BRICS or Chinese yuan or whatever, yes, over the long run, it will overtake the dollar, but it'll only do so as that economy overtakes the United States economy as far as a percentage of global GDP.
So I saw a chart of GDP of the G7 versus GDP of BRICS. And if you look at the GDP of the G7, it's a chart that goes like this. And if you look at the GDP of BRICS, it's a chart that's going like this.
Yeah, well, the trend is there, but still, as a percentage, it still heavily favors the G7.
So I don't know if you've got that chart. It was a tweet by Gabor Gurbax, I think is his name, and he shows the chart that does that and that. And the trend you can see of when you look at it in isolation, it's nothing. But if you look at it over a long period, it's actually quite a scary chart because BRICS is going up and the G7 is going down, and the two crossed a long time ago, kind of like that. I also saw some stats that showed the GDP of China relative to the GDP of the US forecast for 10 years from now. And let me tell you, it's scary because the rate of acceleration in China versus the decline versus the US it's a very, there we go. So that's the line that I was talking about. The red line is the BRICS countries. The blue line is the G7, and that's GDP, and that's going from 1995 to 2025. Now the lines have crossed. Okay, you were talking about people wanting to hold the currency of the economy that was growing in GDP.
I'm trying to, I don't have my glasses.
There's your number. There's your chart. There's your chart. You've got the BRICS countries growing in GDP. Yeah. You've got the G7 going down. The biggest economy in the G7 is the US.
Yeah, so the only other equation is that dollar-denominated debt, which is future demand for dollars, and how rapidly or looking at another chart of global debt denominated in dollars outside the United States, as you start to see that decline from, let's say, 70% down to 65, you're seeing the dollar lose reserve status in real time. But what the mistake people make here is when they look at this equation and probabilities, is they only focus on dollars being on the asset side of the balance sheet, and they forget that dollar liability is on that other side, and that creates future demand for those dollars. And if the banking system contracts, if we have a global slowdown and economic depression, those dollars are going to be harder to come by. Now, people say that, oh my gosh, the Fed's going to print money, and we're going to do all this money printing. That's fine, but how do those dollars get outside the United States? You see, the way they get outside the United States is through the trade deficit. Well, that's fine. That's $1.2 trillion per year, but you're looking at a global economy that needs $100 trillion, or that has $100 trillion in it. So that's just a drop in the bucket. So go ahead.
Just try and look for. I'm just trying to think. There's another chart we could actually show you. What percentage of countries are holding US dollars as part of their global reserve or something like that? And what you'll see is that over time it has declined.
Yeah, but that's central banks.
Central banks.
Yeah, I agree, but I think you really got to look at the private sector there. And then to do that, that's why I like looking at that debt, because it includes the debt on the balance sheet of the private sector.
So I think what we can agree on is that de-dollarization should happen.
Yeah, and it is happening.
And it is happening. The problem is that there's no viable alternative currency right now that could displace the dollar. So as I say, in order for de-dollarization to happen, you've got to have a viable alternative. You're basing it on trade. Right now, there is no BRICS currency. And if there was one united BRICS currency, maybe we'd see a different story.
Yeah, and you've got to have something that interrupts the network. I mean, I know you're a crypto guy, so you know how important networks are.
Well, that's...
And there's never been a more powerful network than the dollar.
Correct.
Never, ever. When you include the Eurodollar system and the global banks that are on dollars, so how do you penetrate that? That's
I just
very
pulled up
difficult.
the growth level of BRICS versus GDP may be ahead, but size-wise, it's not yet. Population-wise, BRICS is obviously
that's
BRICS
what I was saying. I just couldn't see the chart.
That's why I wanted to find it. BRICS is size of population. It's not even close.
No.
But in regards to GDP, the G7 still has BRICS speed.
But growth is exponential.
You can't. By the way, the one that is going to drive it, and they're not going to slow. I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. I think India is going to continue to do what they're doing.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.